programs. Oh, perfect. Thank you.
Yes.
Managing Director of Education and Programs at Tandem Coaching Academy. So she is going to be, her topic is coaching beyond powerful questions. And it looks like this is a popular topic. And we're really excited to have you. So I'm going to hand everything over to you.
All right, well, great. Thanks for having me. It's nice to be here and to see some familiar faces and meet new people. So I'm gonna go ahead and share and pull you all over here so I can see you. All right, so we're gonna talk about some professional coaching skills. I think many of you have probably heard about powerful questions. It seems to be a big buzzword in the community. And what else, right? So if you think about coaching and coaching skills, what Scrum Masters are doing with their teams, with what Agile coaches are doing, there seems to be a bit of a kind of a maybe misinformation about what coaching is, and a thought that, well, coaching is only about asking questions. If I'm a coach, that's all I can do. I can't do anything except ask questions. I can't have any ideas. I can't, give any of my own thoughts. I've just got to ask questions and nothing else. And that can be pretty restrictive, especially when, that's people get a little bit upset if you don't actually do something more than ask questions. So I want to kind of free you up on that tonight and tell you, yeah, there is coaching beyond just asking powerful questions. Powerful questions are important. Questions are really important because they're a big basis of how we work. However, they're not the only thing. And so we'll look at what ICF, the International Coach Federation, calls coaching and how they define it and the competencies as they see it. So as we get started, I wanted to kind of put the word out just in case you don't know. We released this book on enterprise coaching in December. And so it's out there if you're interested, if you are an Agile coach or any change agent in the organization, it can be really helpful. It just looks at from beginning to end, how do you start working with an organization? How do you get clients? How do you market yourself? And what happens when you get there at the client site? Now what? And so feel free to grab that. So let's get started. What do you think the most annoying thing that an Agile coach can do, based on what the people they're coaching say, especially leaders? So feel free to speak up or drop some thoughts in the chat. What's the thing that people think are the most annoying?
I think pushing your agenda onto, those that are trying to receive it.
Yeah, pushing your own agenda. We've got to do it my way. I know more than you know. Those kinds of things. You're broken. I'm here to fix you. Yeah. Yep. All right. I see not listening, micromanaging, wanting things to move faster than they really are. Yeah. Not knowing how to enter a system. So just barging your way in there and start telling people what to do. Giving an idea and then leaving us and not following up. Yeah, that can be aggravating too. Right, coming up with a list of prescriptive solutions before they even understand the team or the problem, I would add. Asking irrelevant questions. Cool. Forgetting about empathy and sticking to the coaching process. I'm just coaching. There's no people involved, right? Not building relationships, judging. Wow, there's a lot of aggravating things that Agile coaches can do. I can tell. Makes me wonder how many of those I've done. I've probably done several of those, right? So when I was leading coaching organizations in large companies with enterprise coaches in multiple places around the company, the number one complaint that I got, when I get that phone call and it started with, "Get this coach out of here." I don't know why they're here. I don't know why I'm paying them. Get them out of here before I choke them. It's like, what's going on? And they would say, every time we ask them how to do something, they say, well, how would you do it? It's like, really? Get them out of here. Why do I need them? Right? And it was so frustrating. How many of you have experienced that? Well, how would you do it? Maybe you even said, well, how do you want to do it? Right? Because it's this big challenge around, but we can't tell you what to do because we're coaches. We left our brain at the door. We cannot say anything except ask questions. Well, that's not really true. And so it's a trap, right? It's this trap that says, as a coach, all I can do is ask questions, and I'm bound in this little thing. And I think it's because as an industry, we introduce questions as this is something coaches do. They ask more questions and they give answers. And somewhere along the line, it turned into all you can do is ask questions. But the reality is that's not coaching, not all by itself. It's one skill that you use as a coach, but it is not coaching as a whole. Okay, let's see, another fallacy. People are naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and have all the resources they need to achieve their goal. Now, I think this is true that people are naturally creative. They're resourceful. They're not broken. They don't need me to fix them. However, when you take this thought to the extreme, people add on. And as a coach, I can't help them by telling them. All I can do is ask questions. I can't give my own expertise. I can't give my own wisdom. And the reality is, if people have hired you as a scrum master or a coach, they didn't hire you because you know how to ask questions. They hired you because you know Agile. And so when we get in there and then we're like, nope, I can't know any Agile, that's kind of like bait and switch. Like, that's not who I hired. The person in the interview knew all kinds of stuff, and now you won't tell me anything. And so there has to be a balance. What we don't want to do is be in a place where we're watching people go off a cliff. And we don't want to also be in a place where our first reaction is, I'm going to tell everybody what to do, because then you get some of this other stuff. It's my agenda, not your agenda. I know it's broken. I'm going to tell you how to fix it. Listen to me. I'm going to fix everything. Micromanaging whether people, how process and everything else. And so there's this balance that needs to happen. So when we look at what good coaching is, it's a balance between, not only can we ask questions, questions is a tool that will help you to have something to listen to. The real skill there is listening. But good coaching takes a measure of both challenge and support. So it's not even just the questions that make good coaching. If you think about the relationship that you have with your clients and the way you interact with them, right? So if you are not challenging your clients, like actually challenging what they're saying, challenging their thinking, giving observations that help them to see beyond their current little box that they're thinking in, right? And you're not supporting them, then that's not coaching at all. I don't know what it is, but it's not coaching, right? And so if you just show up at work and you're not supporting people and you're not challenging, nothing really is happening. There's no value. On the other hand, if you are highly, highly supportive, which I think Scrum Masters and Agile coaches need to be supportive, and they need to be highly supportive. And if that's not balanced with challenge, and you're just really supportive, but you're not challenging them, then that's just like you're actually colluding with them and supporting them to not change and to not do things differently. So I can remember I worked in an organization and there was a Scrum Master who was a great guy, really supportive. He loved the team loved him. Everybody thought he was great. He thought the team was great. And so I had joined as a coach, and what I was being told was that this team hadn't actually delivered anything in like 6 sprints, nothing. Nothing was coming up. And so I sat in on a retrospective with them. And in that retrospective, the Scrum Master's facilitating, and the improvement item that they came up with, the thing they wanted to focus on, they were like, well, we just want to keep being awesome. Cool. And he was like, cool, keep being awesome. End of retrospective. And I was like, what the heck is happening here? Could somebody please tell me your definition of awesome? Because it's very clear that you're not delivering anything and you think you have nothing to improve and you're just going to keep being awesome. So could somebody please define awesome for me? Right. So that was an example of being really, really supportive, but not being willing to challenge. Like somebody needed to challenge this team to say, okay, awesome, great. What is that to you? And then you can't just be highly challenging and not balance that with support. Otherwise, you get some of that, this coach or this Scrum Master or this manager, they're just this micromanager, they're, coming in and rolling over everybody. And you create a whole lot of stress because you're pushing and pushing and pushing, and they're not getting the support they need to actually get things done. So what's the sweet spot for really being an effective coach is you want high support and you want high challenge, because they balance each other out. You challenge so that people go further and think further, and you support so that they don't get that I'm just being run over and I'm just being dictated to, right? So you want to have that good balance. And so it's really important, if you feel like you're a really supportive coach, that's wonderful. Make sure that your challenge is equal. And if you're really challenging, make sure that your support is equal, because you need both in equal measures and in high measures, because that's what helps your team to really take off and to really become higher performing. Another thing that we look at with coaching, beyond just what questions can we ask, is understanding the whole person and how you work with the whole person. And sometimes that person is actually a team. The team is your client, right? And so it's the team as an entity, the whole thing, not just the individuals in the team. And so there's this hierarchy of things. So capabilities, behaviors, environment, those things usually focus kind of on the problem. What's the problem at hand? How do we fix it? What's not working? What can we do? Where do we need to learn and grow? How do we need to change our behavior? What is going on in the environment that supports us or doesn't support us? And I think a lot of Agile coaches focus here, especially on behaviors, right? So capabilities, what's the process? Are you doing Agile? Is this Agile? Are you following the Scrum ceremonies and stuff like that? Behaviors, they're often looking at managers and what managers do, and how are you interacting with the team and all that stuff. And the environment, which are all important. However, in order to get longer change, sustainable change, you have to go further up into the system and look at the identity, values, and beliefs. When you change the way people think, or they change the way they think, I should say, and that mindset changes and what they believe changes and who they view themselves to be changes, the capabilities, behaviors, and environment will change as a result. But if you solely focus on capabilities, behaviors, and environment, this is where often what you're getting is compliance. You've got to do this or you're going to get in trouble. If you want to keep your job, you've got to do it this way. I'm going to deem you uncoachable and tell your boss or whatever. And so you get a lot of compliance. However, when that forcing mechanism is gone, you or whoever else is doing this, things tend to roll back. And over the years that I've been coaching organizations, I've seen way too many organizations roll back. And what I've noticed over time is that it's been the ones that I've seen roll back the furthest have been the ones where the coaches have been really pushing only on behaviors and compliance and doing it the way I think it needs to be done, right? So something to think about there. And so we're going to be looking at some of the competencies that ICF brings in, that is the whole of coaching, not just questions. Right? Before we do that, I want to see if anybody has thoughts, questions, anything that you want to bring up based on what we've just talked about before we jump into these competencies. So feel free to come off mute or type something in the chat, and we'll take a few minutes and hear your thoughts. Ryan?
Yeah, on the matrix, that there is in the lower right quadrant of stress. I don't, and maybe I didn't catch what we talked about, but it feels like that's meaning that you're being very supportive, but you're frustrating your client in that case. Am I interpreting that correctly?
I think it's that you're being very challenging. So you're pushing them, but you're not offering enough support.
Okay.
Low support, which stresses people out.
Just for clarification, how do you define support? What all do you include in that?
So support could mean empathy. It could mean actually getting one-on-one with people and helping them jump in there and solve their problem. Not you giving them all the solutions, but being a full partner in there and solving their problem. It could mean making things transparent, saying what you're noticing. Right. So it could be, it could fall under a bunch of things, but I would say at the end of the day, it's what makes people feel seen, respected, heard, and valued. Anybody else? All right. So when we look at professional coaching, which is what we're borrowing from in order to work as Agile coaches. So Agile coaches do more than just coaching, right? They do training, they do consulting, mentoring, facilitating, and they do some coaching. And so if we look at just the slice that's coaching, here's the competencies of that. However, in my understanding and the way that I've experienced success is that you're not the reality is you're not going to be coaching all the time. You're not going to be having like one-on-one coaching conversations most of the time. Most of the time, what you're doing is interacting with individuals in the organization. And so what's the most helpful is to adopt a coaching mindset. That is a change in the way you think, in the way you believe, in what you value and how you value people. And as a result of that, the way you behave becomes different. So instead of jumping in and giving all the answers, you're actually listening more. You're asking more questions, not only for you to understand, but for them to understand more, right? And so approaching things the way a coach would is a bit different than the way a consultant would. So for example, a consultant, if you're thinking about just pure consulting, and a consultant will come into an organization, they'll look around, they'll see what's wrong, and then they'll say, okay, that's broken, you need to fix it like this, and that are broken, and you should be doing this. And they just kind of go, and they either stay and help bring that, or they leave and leave you with a $500,000 PowerPoint so that you can figure out how to do it yourself. And so that's kind of a pure consulting approach. From what I've seen, a lot of Agile coaches are working like that. They come into an organization, they're like, okay, you're doing this and this and this, and you should be doing this and this. But what they haven't done is listened, and they don't really understand the problems, and they're applying solutions. And so when we do it from a coaching mindset, it's more like, okay, I come to your organization and I'm going to start talking to people. And I want to understand what's working well for you and what you think is not working well for you. I want to understand what are the problems you're having and what is most painful for you. And what do you think isn't working? What I think isn't working is irrelevant, because it's not about Agile. It's about getting the business results you need. So I want to know what's stopping you from doing that. And then so as we talk about that and understand that, then let's look at the themes that come up. And that's what we're going to focus on, is the things that you say are broken. Because what's not important is that we do a stand-up and we do, it's 15 minutes and we answer 3 questions and we have all these different ceremonies. None of that stuff is really important. What's important to the client is that their problems get solved. And the reality is that when you look at what their problems are and you help them to work through solving their most important problems first, most of the stuff that you saw that's broken is going to get fixed anyway, because that's usually part of the problem. The difference is if I come in and I start assigning solutions to you, you're going to rebel and you're going to be like, who are you to tell me what to do? But if I come in and I say, what problem do you have? Great, let's work on it together. Oh, here's these things that might help. What do you think? That's a whole different conversation. And then we're focused on their success, not my success. My success is get all this stuff agile. Their success is stop my pain and help me get business results. So these coaching skills are actually what you're going to use in the way you interact with people, whether you're in a coaching conversation or not, right? Because all of it is coaching. It's not just a coaching conversation. Any thoughts there before we start digging into these one at a time?
How would you respond if a client wanted you to verify their output, so to speak? So in other words, rather than asking you to partner with them, they want you there to verify what they're going to think is the right approach. And if you don't verify it the way that they would like you to, it's back to, you're not really solving our needs.
Yeah. So if they have like their plan, if I understand you right, that they're like, we think this is the right plan. We want you to put the rubber stamp on it. Well, I'm not going to put a rubber stamp on it. Maybe I'm not the right coach for them, but I'm not going to put a rubber stamp on it unless it deserves one, right? Instead, what I'm going to do is I'll say, well, let's walk through it. Let's talk about it. And I'm going to, as I see things, I'll start poking and asking them questions about it, right? So, okay, I see this, but what I don't see is this. So how do you make those two things work together? And then how are you going to respond if this thing happens? Right. And so my role there is to help them to take what they're looking at and to see broader around it so that they can close up those gaps. And at the end of the day, if I think the decision they're making is going the wrong direction, I'll say, these things I think sound fine. This I'm really concerned about, and I don't think it's the right thing to do. This is why. This is my experience. And so what do you want to do with that? Right. And if they want to just say, well, we're just going to keep going, cool. How can I support you? Right. Because they can only change their company. I can't change it for them. And so either they will do what I don't think works and it'll work. Cool. Great. I love when that happens. Or they'll do it and it won't work. And then they'll be like, okay, well, that didn't work. Cool. We want to try something else. And then we go on from there.
Okay, thank you. And my only concern is, again, if it doesn't work, they say, oh, it's that terrible agile coach we should have hired.
Right. And that's why I'm really clear up front. I can't make this change for you. You have to. And I already told you this was against what I thought. And some of the things I think will work won't work. But that's why you always give it back to them to make the decision. Here's my input. Here's my experience. And what do you want to do? And how would that need to work in your environment to actually make a difference?
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. And I think that kind of brings us to the first thing, this, what ICF calls is the coaching agreement. And it's really clarifying the goal. What's the work we're going to do together? So whether you're a Scrum Master, coach, you're working with individuals, organizations, or teams, you need to be really clear about what is it that we're trying to achieve together. What I don't see happening enough with coaches or scrum masters, so let's start with coach at the organizational level, is there seems to be this big resistance from coaches around having a coaching plan, having a plan of this is what we're working on, this is how we know success, this is how we know progress. And so what happens is you hear leaders and they're like, why are we paying these coaches? What in the world are they doing? They're walking around doing stuff. We don't have any idea why they're here. Well, guess what? When their money gets tight and they have to start cutting back, guess who goes first? The people who they have no idea what you're doing and you are very expensive. Don't create that for yourself. What you want to do is build out that plan of what is it that we want to be focused on? What is it that we're trying to make changes in? So we want to identify current state, future state, the desired state. How do we know success? So what is the state? What are the markers or indicators that we're making progress and that we've got the results we need? And how does it tie back to business results? Because remember, the goal is not agile. So how does that tie back? And so at the organizational level, you want to build that and you want to check in on it every couple of months or so. Like, here's where we are. And do we need to change anything? Have we made enough progress on some things that you're ready to say we're good with those? Or do some of these not matter anymore? Or do we need to even revamp the plan we have? Right. And some of the things I'll put in that plan is here's some things we'll likely do towards this. But it's not like it's a project plan of we're going to do this 400 things and we have to complete all of them. It's more like, yeah, we'll probably do some training and some workshops and whatever, so that they have some clarity around what is the work I'm doing and what is their responsibility and my responsibility and how are we going to know success. Okay. If you're working as a Scrum Master, I'd say same thing on a different scale. Not only should you be, like facilitating events and stuff like that, but I would say at the very least, like on some quarterly buckets, what is it that we're focusing on to improve over the next few months? And build that out. And how will we know we've gotten there? What's the measure of success and what's the measure of progress? And what are some of the things we're going to do to get there? Because that's where you're going to really be able to measure and see impacts, and you're going to be able to communicate the value that you're providing as a Scrum Master. Because it's not only coaches that people think, I have no idea what they're doing, why are we paying them? It's Scrum Masters too. And so this is a big thing about not only does it give you and them clarity about the work you're doing together, but it also is your way of showing, like, here's the value that I'm providing. So the next competency that ICF brings to the table is building trust and rapport. And you probably all know that without trust and without relationship, you're going to get nowhere. Right? And so it's really important to build this trust and rapport. When you first start with a team or an organization, not coming in and being like, okay, here's all the stuff that's wrong. Instead, spend a few weeks and get to know people. Build some rapport. One of the things that ICF says in that second slide, it was about seeing people as creative, resourceful, and whole. I phrase it a little bit differently. I say competent, creative, resourceful, and unbroken. They do not need me to fix them. And when you see people that way, it is a whole different way of working. I want you to think for a minute, if you really, really, really 100% believed that the people you're working with, those managers that are getting on your nerves and the tech leads or whoever who are just making your life hard because they're not doing what you told them to do, if you really, really believe they were competent, what would be different about the way you interact with them and about the way you respond to them? When you see those things that they're doing this weird stuff and you're like, what in the world are they doing? Why did they make this decision? And it's almost like these dummies comes behind that, even if you don't say it out loud. What would be different? Give me some thoughts.
I know what happens for me is I feel like I'm pretty good at meeting people where they are. And not being judgmental about, we all have flaws, we all have backgrounds, we all have, and so sometimes though, I think that doesn't allow me to challenge, because I'm like, well, this is where this person is in their life. These are the experiences that they've had. And I'm kind of more accepting of who they are in the moment. And so I might be inclined to not challenge them.
Yeah.
So I know that's probably not the best. They still need to be challenged, I think, but it's hard to do that when you're attempting to accept, meet them where they are.
Right. Yeah. And so you probably tend to be more on the supportive side. And some of that is like you telling yourself, oh, that's okay. They're broken in these areas, and that's why they do that. And so when we see people, when we truly believe that the people we work with are competent, like they were running this company before you got there, they're probably going to be there when you're gone. They're way up in their careers. They can afford you. So they're probably doing something right. Right. Yeah. And I see a bunch of different answers in the chat about empathetic confrontation and avoiding bias, being non-judgmental, curious, right? It's true that when you see people as competent and they make these decisions and you're like, what in the world is happening? Instead of going to the, they're so frustrating, you go to the, there must be a real reason why they did this. I wonder what was going on and if that's still a problem, right? And so you start to get more curious. And so when you look at people that way and you interact with people that way, you can build a lot more trust. Because look, you all know it. You know when somebody's talking to you and you're like, yeah, they're talking down to me, or this guy thinks I'm an idiot. People know it. So it's not like you're hiding it. And so it's really about not trying to just change your outward behavior so they don't know what you're really thinking on the inside. It's about changing the way you think and the way you interact, because that impacts the way you interact with people. And it also impacts how much you jump in and save, right? I'm not going to save you. Okay, so I asked a question and you have no answer. I'm going to sit here and wait. You'll figure it out. I trust you. And if you don't know what I asked and the question didn't land, then you'll say, okay, could you ask that some other way, please? Because I don't have any idea what you just said, right? And I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
That's helpful. Thank you.
All right, the next one here is coaching presence. So there is this competency around coaching presence, and it's about how you show up. And you've probably heard people talk about like executive presence. Like there's this way that you show up and it does something to the atmosphere. I've had people on teams tell me, when you're here, when you're just like in the room with us, even if you say nothing, it's different. It's different when you're here, because it's bringing that whatever it is, that peace, that settled feeling, whatever it is, it's bringing that into the room. And so, and it's about being all there, right? When you're actually in a coaching conversation, you're all in. You're like, there is nothing else. I'm focused on you and I'm totally listening to you and I'm here in the moment and I'm responding to you and I'm asking questions to understand and to listen, not just to look for a place to jump in, right? And there's a lot of partnership in this. And when you have this coaching presence, you can enable the client to lead. And so instead of you saying, here's the 10 things that are broken, it's what do you think is broken? How can we work on the things that are getting in your way the most? Let's focus on what you need to be successful. And that presence shows up, and it builds, it also builds that trust in relationship. Okay? Any other thoughts?
Do you relate this, the presence again, the aura that you bring to a room, also into an intimate or one-to-one conversation about the concept of holding the space, kind of letting that, being present with someone and letting that silence, I don't know, percolate, if you will. You think, do you view that as part of presence in this mode?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is presence. So it's the ability to listen. It's the ability to use silence as a skill, right? And give space for people to think, and give space for them to, process. And so, yeah, there's a lot of the aspects of it as you get deeper into coaching and understanding that empathetic, observant, responsive, all of those things are a part of coaching presence. Okay. And so listening, powerful questions gets all the hype, but the reality is you can't ask questions if you can't listen. What's really amazing about a coaching conversation and the way coaches work with people is, like in a normal conversation, I ask a question, you answer, right? You ask a question, I answer. But in a coaching conversation, if I'm the coach, it's not I ask a question and the client answers, even though I may be asking questions. That's not really what's happening. What's really happening is the client says something, I listen to what they say, and I respond with a question that follows what they're saying, right? So when you start a coaching conversation, you're like, yeah, what do we want to talk about today? That's just an invitation for the client to start talking. From that moment on, everything I do as a coach responds to them. I'm not leading, I'm partnering. And so I listen to what they say, and the questions I have respond to that. And so I'm pulling out what they're saying, and I'm building on it with questions so that they can go deeper into understanding. And some of it I'm making responses to, or I'm reflecting back what I heard. So there could be multiple things that come in there. We'll talk about those in just a minute. But it's in response to them. They're leading, I'm partnering with them. Listening also includes the whole person. So active listening skills that you've probably all heard, things like eye contact and body language, reflecting, those things are skills. They're active listening skills, and actively listening is more than just that, right? So it's hearing what the client says. It's hearing what they don't say. It's hearing the story behind the story. Right. And a lot of that listening is what you're going to be making observations about. Sounds like this is really stressful for you. Or, I hear you saying this, but you talked about wanting to get a promotion, and you're also talking about you're really stressed and can't handle any more work. So how do those two things match up? Right. And so it's those types of observations. You're listening to what's going on, and you're like, what's happening here? Something's not in alignment, right? And of course, you can't hear and listen if you're talking. So silence. And then when we talk about listening, there's multiple levels of listening. Most of us have conversations day to day in level 1 listening, which is I'm really listening to what's in my head. And while you're talking, I'm figuring out what I'm going to say next. Or you're talking and I'm figuring out the solutions because I know your problem. I know the answer. I've been listening for 15 seconds. I know exactly what's going on, right? Or we're building arguments, right? Or we're worried about, oh no, what's the best question I should ask next, right? Really, you want to stop doing all that. Get out of level 1 listening. Get into level 2 listening. Listen, fully listen. Be 100% there. And when they're done talking, take a breath, think about what you want to say and then say it. You don't have to try to, if you try to do it while they're talking, then you're not really going to connect with them because you're not going to be listening. Questions. Here we are, powerful questions, the thing most people know about. I'm going to be honest. I don't like the term powerful questions because I think it kind of sets people up to think, oh, if I just get the book that's got the powerful questions, I can ask those and they're going to be perfect and they're going to work. That's not actually true. What makes questions powerful is almost an accident, right? Yes, they have to be well-formed questions, which means they're open-ended. They start with who, what, when, where, why, how. How and what are your best friends. The others use sparingly. They are short, 3 to 7 words. If you ask long rambling questions, by the time you get to the end, the client doesn't know what the beginning was and they have no clue what to answer. Should be one question, not 3 or 4 questions stacked on one another. Again, I don't know which one to answer, right? And so you want to use as few words as possible. And the reality is most of the time, you start asking a question, the client starts thinking, 4 words in, they're ready to answer, and 15 words in, you're just getting to the end of the question that they never listened to because they were already identifying what they were going to say next. So we do better to shorten those questions, right? And then the other thing that makes questions powerful is that they are transformational, not transactional. Nobody ever got a big revelation from taking data out of their brain and putting it into your brain. What happened? What did they say next? You know, whatever, those type of things. Tell me all about your experience. Nobody learns anything from that because they already know it. They're just giving you that information. So we want to step away from transactional questions and ask transformational questions. Transformational questions are about things they don't already know. How do you want it to be? Don't tell me how it was and what happened. What do you want to happen next time? Right? What is it? What would it look like if you did that? Right? And so we want to look forward facing so that they can start to expand their thinking and they can start to figure out stuff that they don't know. Coaching is about learning. The #1 goal of coaching is learning and awareness, right? They want the client to know more when they left than they did when they came. You might get to that goal that you said, this is what we're trying to get to. You might get to that. You should be moving in that direction. You may not. That's okay. What's important is that the client learns something because remember, they can solve their own problems if you help them see in a wider space. So bring out that learning. So the other thing that would make a question powerful is you just got lucky and you asked the right question at the right time and something clicked in the client's head. 30 seconds later, it wouldn't be powerful. You know, the next day, that same question or ask that same question to somebody else, it may land flat. It's really just, a lot of it is luck, right? You're just asking good questions. And every once in a while, something clicks. And that's where this concept of, oh, that was a really powerful question. Great. But there's not a list. These lists of questions can kind of help you figure out how to formulate questions. But the best questions are responsive to what the client says. And that's what tells them you're really listening. All right, so any thoughts before we move forward? Questions, thoughts, observations?
It
Okay,
feels
sure.
like a, sorry, go ahead.
I can share a thought as far as like when it comes to questions. I'm always 50-50 when it comes to whether I say it, but sometimes I have those direct but hard questions like, okay, hey, what's really going on here? Is the problem me? You know, or so what I'm understanding is that maybe you don't like who I am. So is that what's going on? Or, you know, something to that effect, or just real direct, maybe uncomfortable, wherever it may be, but it's like, how do I strategize? No, I'm just going to tell how it is and, you know, see where this road goes. How do you handle difficult questions?
I think that's part of challenging, right? So what's really going on here? Good. That's a challenging question. right? And so I think challenging questions are good. That doesn't mean they have to be rude. But yes, you want to ask those challenging questions. That's part of the seeing behind what's being said. Yeah, I hear everybody dancing around something and it smells like there's an elephant in here. Does anybody else smell that? Right? There's something going here, y'all are dancing around. What's really happening? Right? And that's the value the coach adds, is the ability to make things transparent. This is what I'm hearing. I hear you all arguing, but you're all saying the same thing. And everybody just wants to prove their point, but nobody's listening to what anybody else is saying. How's that land? Right? And those are the kind of things that you're making transparent, you're bringing up, you're making those observations, you're asking challenging questions. Now, I will say that when you start your relationship with people, you want to have conversations about that, right? Hey, this is how I work, how we're going to work together. Sometimes I might have challenging observations, whatever. And so if I have something that's particularly challenging that I think is going to sting, I might give them a little bit of warning, right? Or I might say, hey, can I make an observation here? Or, hey, I want to ask you a question. It might sting a bit. And then I ask it. That warning kind of just gives them time to, okay, let me breathe. Let me prepare myself. But I don't always do that. Only like I said, when it's like, oh, this is going to hurt.
Yeah.
All right. There was somebody else.
Yes, I was just going to say, it seems like a big part of the, you keep bringing up the whole be a partner, be on the side of the client. It seems like a lot of people come in with the mentality of the client's doing everything wrong. I'm going to tell them how to do it right. And the reality is every decision they had, there was a good reason for doing it that way at the time. It might not have been a good thing to do, but there was a good reason to do that thing. And I just like that you keep pointing out that respect and that partnership idea of work with instead of working against.
Right. Yeah. No one wakes up in the morning and says, I'm going to go to work and just screw everything up today. Right. Everybody only makes, or most people don't. Everybody makes the best decisions they can with the information they have in that moment. That's all they can do. And as things change, you get more information and maybe you change things, you change the decisions. So yes. And I also think that, yes, coaches do that. And the problem that I have with it is that, first of all, there is nothing that is going to be 100% right all the time, right? The only answer in Agile that is 100% of the time correct is it depends, right? Because it does, right? And so just because it worked in the other environment doesn't mean it's going to work here. And so we can't take our own experiences and then come try to shove them into a new system because it's a different system. It might seem like the same problem, but the structure behind the problem, the political system, the process system, the technical system, the human system behind it is different. And it might not fit in the same way. And the reality is most of us don't really understand everything about the client's environment like they do, unless we've been immersed in it for a really long time like they have. And so we want to be careful as we give those things. This is what I've seen worked. And how does that sound for you? Right? And would something like that work here? What ideas does it give you? Because really they're the only ones who fully know their environment. And the thing is, I'm leaving, they've got to live with it. Right? And I can't change their world. They've got to make their own changes. And so, yeah, so and I do see that a lot where people come and they're like, this is how you do it. You see that a lot with frameworks, scaling frameworks. Oh, we're going to implement whatever. Great. But how do we know we need all that? And how do we know taking something out the box is going to work here? Oh. All right. And then the last one kind of comes into Kim's comments there about direct communication. Right? We want to share observations and intuitions. My sense is this. My sense is we're beating around the bush here. My sense is that there's fear. Our thoughts, our feelings, but not judgments. And be careful, because judgment can go either way. You can send a message of judgment that these are the right answers, these people are the smart people, and these people have the wrong answers. You want to be neutral, right? And so that it's really about handling the data. Everything is information for the clients to work with, and you want to let them sort through it without influencing, overly influencing, I should say. Especially when you're working with teams, because if you're not careful, you'll break trust, because people will think that you like one idea or one set of people better than others, or they will start trying to please you if they know that you're going to be like, oh, that's great, when you really like the idea, and you're going to be like, oh yeah, whatever, when you don't like the idea. And so they may start trying to please you instead of really looking at what they need to do in their environment, right? And so, yeah, you want to communicate acknowledgement. You want to communicate that, acknowledge what people are doing, the work they're doing. Just be careful about acknowledging this is a good decision versus you worked really hard on that, or that decision took a lot of courage. Right? You want to talk about things that are more neutral and that are about the person, not the decisions they made, because they have to own their decisions. If you're concerned about a decision, probe a bit and ask them some questions and help them to see that, okay, this is great. That's a happy path. What about the broken path? Let's talk about some of those things so that they can start to see the risk, and they can figure out how they're going to get around those. Okay? And if you give praise, well, make sure that you actually mean it, because people know when you're just placating them. You want to be specific and be honest. Okay? And so it's all of these coaching competencies together that help you to really be a powerful coach and to really be effective with your clients. And so taking these things and building them into the way you work, they help you to, I think, the way you interact with clients. For some reason, I think we skipped action and accountability. I don't know what happened to that slide, but it's important. So let me just throw that in. There's action and accountability is about helping the client to move forward, right? We learned a bunch of stuff. We talked about a bunch of stuff. Now, what are you going to do with that stuff? And actually helping them to build the process and experiments for how they're going to move forward. Okay. So I'd like to open up and get some conversation going. If you've got thoughts, if you want to leave them in the chat box, or if you want to turn on your mic and talk. And Nancy or Marie, I am not positive what time we stop. So
We have plenty of time.
Okay.
We're usually done at 7:30-ish.
Okay, I thought we had time, but I wasn't positive. So great. All right. So happy to talk about any questions, hear any thoughts. Even if you think you want to disagree, that's totally okay too.
I'd just like to say, first of all, I learned a ton, so I really appreciate taking the time to come speak. This is a great topic. And I find it's a career path, right? So you grow as a coach, and you go through your own learnings and takings away. One of the things that I find that's so valuable is really understanding myself, the ability, the challenge I have in rushing to judgment or rushing. And I really think it's an art of not taking sides, right? Coming in and really not taking a specific side, but looking under the covers at the success of the client. What do they deem as successful, like you mentioned? Really doing that, seeking to understand before seeking to be understood, right? And that's one of the things Lisa Atkins said at one of our coaching events one time that really struck me. Is she said Jimmy Carter was probably one of the best at this, because he'd go in and facilitate two sides coming together, but he'd make sure he stood in the middle and he didn't go to one side or the other in his facilitation techniques.
Yeah.
So I think so I really appreciate the time today.
Very cool. Thank you. Anybody else? How do you suggest dealing with an entrenched culture, unwilling to make specific changes? Oh, this is a good one. We talk about this a lot in the book, the enterprise coaching book. And I think the first step there is understanding what kind of engagement are you in, right? Do they just want you to install Scrum or some other process? Do they really want to do an Agile adoption, which is more of a higher level? Management is bought in. They want to make a change to the culture. They want to make, they're willing to make changes to things like organizational structure and technology structures. And they actually, you've got buy-in from the highest leaders, usually in product and engineering. That is more of an adoption. And then there's transformation, which goes beyond that into the larger company, which you have to have the top leaders who are driving that change. So part of it is understanding, are you trying to change culture, but they're not? Are they just wanting to adopt Scrum and you're trying to change culture? So understanding that difference. Beyond that, assuming they do want to change culture, it's a lot of this is going to be conversations with leaders. And again, were you brought in to actually coach leaders, or are they expecting you to be a Scrum Master and only deal with teams? Not saying that you can't influence, but I would say you want to make those relationships, you want to make it clear, have coaching agreements in place for what is the work we're going to do and how do I give feedback and what are the changes? Remember, I talked about those coaching agreements up front. What's the work we're doing together? And so you can't force people to change because it's not going to work. They're going to hate you. They're not going to listen. And then it's going to roll back anyway. And so a lot of it is listening to what they want. Okay, so what I think needs to change is not going to happen. Let's throw that away and let's talk about what you want. What's in your way? And then you can often make leverage there. And as their problems get taken care of, well, then they're more willing to listen to your problems or to what you're bringing up.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So should an internal coach, full-time employee, behave or approach things differently than an external coach coming in from outside the company? In my own opinion, no. And I can say that because I've done both. I've been both a employee and a external consultant, and I have not interacted differently. In fact, what I think that made me more effective as an employee was I took the same mindset as an employee as I did as a consultant. All of these people are my clients. My boss is my client, their boss is my client, these teams are my clients, the stakeholder is my client, because it helped me to maintain that neutrality. I think the big difference between FTE and consultant is, as an FTE, you've got this false security that your job is secure and it makes you want to, like, I don't want to make waves because I'm going to lose my job, where a consultant knows that they might get up tomorrow and the contract is pulled. The reality is, at any point, even as FTEs, you could lose your job and you're going to probably get a severance, which a consultant won't get. So yay, that's a good thing, right? But really, it's to be able to maintain that neutrality and to actually give that hard feedback and to be able to make transparent the things you need to make transparent. You have to be able to step away from it and not be in it. Because if you're thinking, I need to be successful, now you're going to start pushing people to do what makes you successful. And nobody has any reason to make you successful. Right? I mean, let's just face it. Nobody got up in the morning and said, I'm going to go make Steven successful at work today. No, they're trying to make themselves successful. And so get on their side, try to help them be successful. and you'll get further.
Hmm. Cool. Just a question, Cherie, and apologies if I ramble a little bit. I'm trying to form this in my head. Is there some considerations or some thoughts you have about a person turning up as a coach as their own whole self and their own mental space and own emotion, and maybe what we need to be aware of before we maybe enter into a system or a conversation? And are we ready for this? Is there something going on with us that maybe prevents us or recognizing our own bias or where we are? Have you got any, I suppose, thoughts in that space?
Yeah. So I would say first, if you get training in coaching, you're going to come out the other end a completely different person, because you're going to get coaching all the time. Like in our program, we meet weekly, and you're going to get coaching weekly, or you're going to be coaching somebody weekly. And so by the time that 6 months is up, you're going to have so much coaching that your way of thinking is different, and you have a different demeanor about you. And it's important for you to understand your own triggers and what things, are get in your mind and get you thinking in your level 1, right? And so that's a part of that process of self-management and self-discipline. And so before going into a session, what is it you need to do to get your mind in the right headspace, right? Especially if you get triggered. You don't want to run in and say, this is where we are. You want to be able to have that headspace and to be able to recognize, oh, am I in a space right now where this is about my agenda, or is it the client's agenda?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So I need to back up. Right? What I did when I worked in the office was I have a wheel that's my personal coaching values. And I had it right on the wall right by my office door when I walked out of my office, so that before I walked out, I would stop and check myself and say, do you have all this going on right now that you're going to go approach this the right way? Or do you need to stop and fix some of your thinking? Yeah. And so that was a good trigger for me to say, and then, so that was really helpful for me.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a great share. Thank you very much.
Right. So as an outside coach, do you find it useful to avoid learning too much about internal process and culture, and keep that outsider's perspective? I personally don't get that deep in the weeds. I never touch a tool. I am not touching Jira or Rotary. I don't touch it. I don't know how to work it. I don't want to know how to work it. I don't need access to it. And I don't get what I'm looking at is the bigger picture, and I'm looking at how the system connects. I don't need to know the details about how they do releases unless that's the problem we're trying to talk through. And then I'm going to hear a lot of that, right? But I don't need to know the details. In fact, the less I know about the details, the less prone to saying, this is what you need to do, I'm going to be. Because I don't know. I can't solve this. You have to. So let's talk through how you're going to solve it, and who do we need to get in the room to solve it. That's my personal approach. I see other people get deep in there, and I've also seen them get into the trap where they become the Jira administrator, and that's like a hole I am never going down. I do not want to be there. Any other thoughts? Peter, you look like you just love that.
It's interesting, Cherie, because I've been working with a number of teams and where I'm working at the moment, and the way I don't want to turn this into a conversation about Jira, but it's a very broken tool, and by just doing some simple fixes, just a bit of tweaking, it actually helped me earn their trust, and them thinking, hey, maybe actually this guy could be quite helpful for us. He might have some good ideas. He's fixed this. Let's have some conversations. I'm not recommending that as an approach, but I must admit those little tweaks did help me into the system.
Yeah, it depends on where you come in and what you're doing. I've been in places where I've had to train the tool, and I was like, this is not my job. And so, yeah, do what works for you. Like I said, that's me. I kind of step back, and to me, it's one of those things that I can say, you know what, I have no idea, but let's find somebody who does. And I get into that. I know you can make a dashboard. I don't know how. So why don't we find somebody to help you?
So would it be safe to say in the situation, it depends?
Yeah, always
That
it
answer
depends.
again?
Yes, always the right answer. It always depends. Yeah.
A quick question in that same kind of vent with JIRA methodology. So so if you've got two areas of the organization, they're each using different methodologies. Example being one is using SAFe, the digital organization's using the Silicon Valley product, group approach. How do you take sides? I mean, do you choose one over the other, or if they have to work together across portfolios, how do you handle that? Is it, because I'm thinking the way you said about JIRA, do you go down that rabbit hole of suggesting one over the other or figuring things out, or do you pull yourself back?
I pull myself back and I look at it more from the perspective of, well, what's broken? You're trying to collaborate. What's not working? What is the outcome we need to get to, right? There's something stopping you from getting business results. What are the business results you're trying to get? And what is getting in your way? And if it's collaboration, then how do we need to fix that collaboration? Who do we need to get in the room? What working agreements do we need to have, and so on? If it's, well, leaders, they can't actually map up because there's different technology systems. And I've been there where there's groups there's like 5 different tools. Mm-hmm. And so if your complaint is you need one tool, great, then let's figure out what the one tool is. And we can walk through figuring that out, but I'm not going to make that decision for you. And so let's go through that process of exploring the gaps and what works and what's the best tool for overall, given your budget and your needs. And then let's go from there. Right. So I keep it up at the higher level. Tell me what the problem is and we'll sort through your problem. I don't care what you use. I don't care what tool. I don't care what process. If you're scaling, great. My scaling approach is usually more like, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Okay, there's this, and this. Which one of those feels like it works? What do we want to experiment with? And so I don't teach scaling frameworks, and I don't bring them in out of the carton.
No, that's great advice. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
There was one question, Cherie, that I don't know. Did we see how do you handle a team environment? Did you see that one? Where only 2 people that are doing the talking, they never agree.
No, I did not. Thank you for bringing it. I didn't see it pop up.
Okay.
Only 2 people that are doing the talk and they never agree. Can you give me a little bit of verbal explanation of that one? I want to make sure I understand before I just start saying stuff. Omaka?
Yeah, these are the people that have worked with the organization. They have worked together for like a long time. And one is resistance to change, and the other one wants like an environment where Agile exists. But it feels like they never agree. Like when they start talking, everybody will keep quiet. Like nobody agrees to each other. So it's kind of, I'm a Scrum Master. I'm not yet a coach, but like, I'm just like, okay, how am I going to be handling and maybe coming in between just to make sure that everything is going forward?
Yeah, that can be tough. And it sounds like it's probably leaders too. Again, it's going to depend on where they view you in the organization and if they actually view your input as something they want. And so in general, if it's leaders, we want to try to coach around alignment, right? And often what's happened, even though their process is different, the way they think we should do it is different. If you come up higher, they've got the same goal. They've got the same business results they're trying to get. They're just taking different avenues to get there. And so it's getting them up to that space where there is alignment and they do agree so that we can start to talk about what's in your way there. I think as an overall, you always want to go with momentum. Like if it's chunks of the organization or groups in the organization and you're trying to help them implement Agile, don't go fight with resistance. Never, ever, ever fight resistance. Leave it alone until it dies or goes away. Focus on where the momentum is, because if you focus on resistance, it's going to make more and more noise, which means more and more people are going to gravitate to that must be the right answer. But if you focus on where people are going in the direction you want, they're going to make more and more noise, and it's going to be success. And then people are going to gravitate towards that. Right. So yeah, I think it's about coaching that alignment with the leaders, finding the place where they do align, because right now they're just kind of fighting over where they don't align. And so get them up to a space where they do align, and then go from there. And it may be the case that it's actually the leader above them that's got to make the decisions if they can't figure it out. And so best case is they can figure it out among themselves. Worst case is somebody else has to step in and make the decisions, and then they'll either comply or they won't.
It was a wonderful, wonderful talk. And thanks everybody for the engagement and the great questions. It was a very successful meetup, I would say. So thank you for your time, Cherie, and we'll hopefully see you again in the future.